The harsh Montana sun beat down on Serena Keller's tear-streaked face as her father dragged her across the dusty yard toward the stranger on horseback, his calloused fingers digging into her wrist with a grip that promised there would be bruises come morning. Montana Territory, 1876, 50 pounds of grain for the girl, take it or leave it, Thomas Keller barked, yanking Serena forward like she was nothing more than livestock. She's strong enough for farm work, cooking, whatever you need. Just turned 18 last month. Serena kept her eyes fixed on the dirt beneath her worn boots, shame burning through her despite the cool autumn air. The drought had taken everything: their crops, their livestock. Her mother 2 winters past, but she'd never imagined her father would sink this low. The liquor had hollowed him out, leaving behind a shell of the man who once sang her to sleep. The stranger on horseback shifted in his saddle, and Serena risked a glance upward. He sat tall, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. A dark hat cast shadows across his face, but she could see the clench of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze as he studied her father. "That's not how things work in these parts," the man said, his voice deep and steady. There was something in his tone, not pity, but something close to anger, carefully controlled. Her father spat in the dirt. "I got 5 other mouths to feed, and not a penny to my name. Girl's just another belly wanting food. Take her or don't, but I need that grain." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He stood taller than her father by half a head, his movements measured as he approached. Up close, Serena could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with eyes the color of a summer storm. "Name's Reed Lawson," he said, ignoring her father and addressing her directly. "Miss." Serena swallowed hard, acutely aware of her father's grip tightening on her arm. "Serena," she whispered. "Serena Keller." Reed nodded once, then turned his attention back to her father. Without a word, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. "I'll give you $20 and the grain," he said. "That should see your family through winter." Thomas Keller's eyes widened, and Serena felt her stomach twist with dread. It was more than her father had hoped for, enough to buy whiskey for months. "Deal," her father said quickly, releasing her arm to snatch the pouch. Reed turned to his horse and untied a large sack from behind his saddle, dropping it at Thomas Keller's feet with a heavy thud. "The grain. Count it if you like." Serena stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. She was being sold, actually sold, to a stranger. Her younger siblings were inside the cabin, unaware that their oldest sister was being traded away like a cow at auction. Would they even remember her face a year from now? Reed Lawson turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Get whatever belongings you need, Miss Keller. We'll be leaving directly." Her throat was too dry for words, so she simply nodded and headed toward the small cabin that had been her home for all 18 years of her life. Inside, she grabbed the threadbare satchel from under her bed and stuffed it with her spare dress, a worn hairbrush that had been her mother's, and the small wooden horse her brother Russell had carved for her birthday. Her siblings watched with wide eyes from the corner. "Are you going away, Rena?" 7-year-old Ruth asked, clutching her ragged doll. Serena knelt down, forcing a smile that felt like it might shatter her face. "Just for a while. You be good for Pa, and help with the little ones." She pressed a kiss to her sister's forehead, then each of her brothers, knowing in her heart she might never see them again. When she stepped back outside, Reed Lawson was already mounted, holding his horse steady. Her father had disappeared, likely headed to town with his newfound wealth. The sack of grain remained on the ground where Reed had dropped it. He extended a hand down to her. "Can you ride, Miss Keller?" She nodded, taking his hand and allowing him to pull her up behind him. His hand was warm and calloused, a working man's hand, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. They rode in silence until the cabin disappeared from view, the rolling hills of the Montana Territory stretching endlessly before them. Serena kept her hands at her sides, determined not to touch the stranger any more than necessary, even as the horse's movements threatened to unseat her. After nearly an hour, Reed guided the horse off the main trail toward a small clearing sheltered by pine trees. He dismounted and offered his hand to help her down. "We'll stop here for a moment," he said, his voice softer than before. Fear gripped Serena's heart. This was at the moment where she'd learn what fate awaited her at the hands of this stranger. She braced herself, determined not to show weakness. Reed Lawson took off his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the temples. Without the shadow, his face looked younger, his eyes clear and direct as they met hers. "Miss Keller," he said carefully, "I want you to understand something. I have not purchased you." She stared at him, confusion replacing fear. "But you gave my father. I gave your father money and grain because he needed it, and you deserved better than to be bartered like cattle." He placed his hat back on his head. "You're not beholden to me in any way. You're free to go wherever you choose." Serena blinked, certain she had misheard. "Free?" "Completely free," he confirmed. "I can take you to town or to relatives if you have any nearby." "Or—" He hesitated. "I own a small ranch about a day's ride from here. My sister Emily lives there too. She's been looking for help with the household, proper employment with fair wages. The offer is there if you want it, but you're under no obligation." A rush of emotions flooded through Serena: relief, confusion, and something dangerously close to hope. "Why would you do this? You don't know me." Reed's expression darkened. "I know enough about being treated as property. No person should belong to another." He met her eyes directly. "The choice is yours, Miss Keller. What will it be?" Serena looked back the way they had come, then out across the vast Montana landscape. She had no relatives who would take her in, no friends wealthy enough to support another mouth to feed. The town offered few prospects for a woman alone. "Your ranch," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "If your sister truly needs help, I'd be grateful for the work." Reed nodded once, then turned to tend to his horse. "We'll reach a coaching inn by nightfall. You'll have a proper room, and we can continue at first light." As they resumed their journey, Serena felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, the path ahead didn't seem predetermined. She had made a choice her choice. Whatever awaited her at Reed Lawson's ranch, she would face it as a free woman. Little did she know that this first decision would lead to many more, each one carrying her further from the life she had known and closer to one she could never have imagined. The coaching inn was a weathered two-story building nestled in a small valley. Lanterns glowed in the windows against the darkening sky as Reed guided his horse toward the stables. "Hollister's Inn is simple but clean," he explained as they dismounted. "The owner's wife, Martha, serves the best stew this side of the Mississippi." Serena nodded, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after hours on horseback. She smoothed her skirt self-consciously, wishing she had something better to wear than her faded blue cotton dress. Inside, the inn was warm and filled with the rich aroma of cooking. A few travelers sat at wooden tables, while a portly man with an impressive mustache stood behind a small counter. "Reed Lawson, as I live and breathe," the man exclaimed. "Didn't expect to see you until cattle season." Reed smiled, the first genuine smile Serena had seen from him. "Hello, George. Need 2 rooms for the night if you have them." George Hollister's eyes flickered to Serena with undisguised curiosity. Course. Martha's just serving up supper if you're hungry." He produced 2 keys from beneath the counter. "Rooms 3 and 4, top of the stairs." "Much obliged," Reed said, taking the keys and handing one to Serena. "We'll get settled, then join you for that supper." Upstairs, Serena entered the small room and closed the door behind her, leaning against it as the events of the day washed over her. The room was simple: a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a ceramic basin, and a small window overlooking the stable yard, but it felt luxurious compared to the crowded corner of the cabin she'd shared with her siblings. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, trying to make herself presentable. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a young woman with tired eyes and hair coming loose from its pins. She refastened her honey-brown locks as best she could and pinched her cheeks for color. When she descended the stairs, Reed was waiting at a corner table. He stood as she approached, pulling out a chair for her with a courtesy that surprised her. "Thank you," she murmured, sitting down. A plump woman with kind eyes approached, carrying 2 bowls of steaming stew. "Well, Reed Lawson, you bring a pretty young lady to my establishment and don't even introduce her? I thought your mama raised you better." Reed's ears reddened slightly. "Martha, this is Miss Serena Keller. She'll be helping Emily at the ranch. Miss Keller, this is Martha Hollister, the finest cook in the territory." Martha beamed, setting the bowls before them. "Any friend of Reed's is welcome here. You eat up now, dear. You look like you could use a good meal." The stew was indeed delicious, rich with tender beef and vegetables, and Serena realized she hadn't eaten since morning. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the warmth of the food and the room gradually easing some of the tension from her shoulders. "Your sister," Serena began, wanting to know more about her future employer. "Is she older or younger than you?" "Younger by 4 years," Reed replied. "Emily's 22 and has more spirit than sense sometimes, but she's the heart of our place. She'll be glad for your company. It can get lonely out there for a young woman." "And your parents?" Serena asked, then immediately regretted the question when she saw his expression cloud. "Gone," he said simply. "Pa 5 years ago, ma last winter. Influenza." "I'm sorry," Serena said softly. "My mother passed 2 winters ago as well." Reed nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's just Emily and me now, and about 40 head of cattle. Not the biggest spread, but it's ours free and clear." "Have you lived in Montana Territory long?" "Since '65, right after the war. Pa brought us west from Pennsylvania, looking for a fresh start." Reed took a sip of coffee. "What about your people? Your father mentioned other children." Serena nodded, a pang of guilt striking her as she thought of her siblings. "For younger ones. Ruth is 7, Russell is 10, and the twins, Robert and Randall, are 5. She smiled sadly. "My mother had a fondness for names that start with R. I was the exception." "And your father?" Reed began, then stopped, clearly not wanting to pry. "He wasn't always as you saw him," Serena said quietly. "The drought changed him. Or maybe just showed who he really was." She looked down at her empty bowl. "I worry for the little ones." Reed was silent for a moment, then said, "The grain and money should see them through winter, at least. And I know the pastor in these parts makes regular visits to check on families in need." The thoughtfulness of this comment surprised her. This man who owed her nothing had considered not just her welfare, but that of the family she'd left behind. After supper, they sat by the hearth as other travelers drifted in and out. Martha brought them apple pie and more coffee, clucking over Serena like a mother hen. "You two heading to Reed's place tomorrow?" George Hollister asked as he stoked the fire. Reed nodded. "Should make it by sundown if the weather holds." "Better get an early start then," George advised. "Word is there's a storm coming in from the northwest." As if on cue, the wind outside picked up, rattling the window panes. Serena suppressed a shiver, wondering what awaited her at the end of tomorrow's journey. "I think I'll retire for the night," she said, rising from her chair. "Thank you for the meal and the room." Reed stood as well. "We'll leave at first light, if that suits you." Serena nodded. "Good night, Mr. Lawson." "Reed," he corrected gently. "Just Reed is fine." "Good night, Reed," she amended, the name feeling strange on her tongue. In her room, Serena changed into her nightgown and slipped beneath the quilt. The bed was softer than the straw pallet she was accustomed to, and for a long while, she lay awake, listening to the wind and wondering about the man who had purchased her freedom. He was unlike any man she had known, neither rough like her father, nor brash like the cowboys who occasionally passed through their area. There was a quietness to him, a steadiness that spoke of inner strength rather than force. As sleep finally claimed her, Serena's last thought was that whatever tomorrow might bring, for the first time in years, she was facing it by choice rather than circumstance. Morning came with pale light filtering through a frost-covered window. Serena dressed quickly in her spare dress, a simple brown cotton that was slightly less worn than yesterday's blue one, and pinned her hair in a neat bun. By the time she descended the stairs, Reed was already waiting, 2 plates of eggs and bacon on the table. "Sleep well?" he asked as she joined him. "Better than I have in years," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. They ate quickly, aware of the journey ahead and the threatening weather. Martha packed them a small bundle of food for the road, waving away Reed's attempt to pay extra. "You just bring this young lady back to visit," Martha insisted, patting Serena's hand. "It does my heart good to see Reed with some pleasant company." Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, but dark clouds loomed on the distant horizon. Reed helped Serena mount his horse, then swung up behind her. The arrangement was more intimate than riding behind him had been, and Serena felt a flutter of unease at being so close to a man she barely knew. As they set off, however, Reed maintained a respectful distance, holding the reins on either side of her without actually embracing her. His warmth at her back was a shield against the cold wind, and gradually, Serena relaxed. They rode through rolling hills that gradually gave way to broader valleys. Reed pointed out landmarks as they traveled, a distinctive rock formation that marked the boundary of the next county, a creek that flowed all the way to the Missouri River, a distant mountain peak that had been named for some long-forgotten trapper. "There," he said in the early afternoon, indicating a thin plume of smoke rising in the distance. "That's the Blackwood place. Good neighbors. Their son Jacob helps us with roundup in the spring." Serena nodded, trying to commit the names and places to memory. This would be her world now, at least for a time, and she wanted to understand it. As the day wore on, the clouds moved closer, bringing a sharp drop in temperature. Reed urged the horse to a faster pace, his body tense behind her. "We need to make better time," he said, his breath warm near her ear. "That storm's moving faster than I'd like." They crested a hill just as the first fat snowflakes began to fall. Below them stretched a valley with a modest ranch house nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and a small herd of cattle grazed in a distant pasture. "Lawson Ranch," Reed said, a note of pride in his voice. "Home." The word stirred something in Serena, a longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Home. She wondered if this place could ever truly be that for her. As they approached, the front door of the house flew open, and a young woman raced out onto the porch, waving enthusiastically. "Reed, you're back early," she called, her voice carrying on the wind. Her smile faltered slightly when she noticed Serena. "And you've brought company." Reed guided the horse to the hitching post and dismounted, then helped Serena down. Her legs were stiff from the long ride, and she stumbled slightly, Reed's hand steadying her elbow. "Emily," he called to his sister. "This is Miss Serena Keller. She'll be staying with us for a while, helping out as we discussed." Emily Lawson hurried down the porch steps, her face alight with curiosity and welcome. She was pretty in a vibrant way, with the same storm gray eyes as her brother, but with golden brown hair instead of his darker shade. "Thank heavens," she exclaimed, taking Serena's cold hands in her warm ones. "I was beginning to think Reed would never find someone suitable. Come inside before you freeze. The snow's coming down harder now." Serena allowed herself to be led into the house, overwhelmed by Emily's immediate warmth. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall of the main room. Colorful quilts draped over sturdy furniture and shelves lined with books suggested that the Lawsons valued reading, a luxury Serena had rarely enjoyed. "I've got stew simmering," Emily chattered as she took Serena's satchel. "You must be famished after traveling all day. Reed, take her things to the spare room while I get her something warm to drink." Reed complied without comment, disappearing down a hallway with Serena's meager belongings. Emily bustled about the kitchen, pouring coffee into a ceramic mug and pressing it into Serena's hands. Sit," she urged, guiding Serena to a chair by the fire. "You look half frozen. Was my brother terrible company? He hardly says 10 words together most days." "He was very kind," Serena replied, warming her hands on the mug. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to work here." Emily looked at her curiously. "Where are you from?" Reed didn't mention he was bringing anyone back when he left for town. Before Serena could formulate a response, Reed returned to the room. "It was an unexpected arrangement," he said, his tone making it clear the subject was closed for now. "Emily, Miss Keller has had a long journey. Perhaps we could let her rest before the interrogation?" Emily had the grace to look abashed. "Of course. Forgive me, Serena, may I call you Serena? I'm just so pleased to have another woman around. It gets awfully lonely with just Reed for company." "Serena is fine," she assured Emily, finding the younger woman's enthusiasm oddly comforting after the events of the past day. Outside, the snow was falling in earnest now, the wind driving it against the windows. Reed moved to stoke the fire, adding another log. "Storm settled in," he observed. "Might be a day or two before it passes." "Perfect timing then," Emily said brightly. "It will give Serena a chance to get settled without having to jump straight into work." She turned to Serena. "I hope you don't mind, but I've been desperate for help with the household. Reed tries, bless him, but he's hopeless with anything finer than chopping wood." Reed raised an eyebrow at his sister, but didn't contradict her. "I'm happy to help however I can," Serena said. "I've managed a household since I was 14. Emily beamed. "Wonderful. We'll start tomorrow after you've had a proper rest. For now, let's have some of that stew." As they ate at the sturdy oak table, Serena observed the easy rapport between the siblings. They moved around each other with the comfortable familiarity of people who had shared a space for years, anticipating needs without having to voice them. Reed was more animated with his sister than he had been on the journey, though still reserved compared to Emily's effervescence. After supper, Emily showed Serena to the spare room, a small but comfortable space with a real bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out over the snow-covered yard. "The washroom is down the hall," Emily explained. "We have a pump inside, Reed's idea after our first Montana winter. The outhouse is still necessary for, well, you know." She smiled sympathetically. "I'm sure it's not what you're used to." Serena almost laughed at the irony. This room, this clean, private space with its own window and a real bed, was more luxury than she had ever known. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "Thank you." Emily hesitated at the door. "Serena, I don't know what brought you here or what arrangements you made with my brother, but I want you to know you're welcome. We're not formal people, and I hope you'll feel at home here." The simple kindness brought unexpected tears to Serena's eyes. "Thank you," she said again, not trusting herself to say more. When Emily left, Serena sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the wind outside and the occasional creaks of the house settling. From somewhere down the hall, she could hear the low murmur of Reed and Emily's voices, though she couldn't make out their words. She unpacked her few belongings, placing her mother's hairbrush on the dresser and tucking the wooden horse beneath her pillow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new duties, but for tonight, she was safe and warm, with a door she could close and a bed of her own. As she drifted toward sleep, Serena realized that for the first time in years, She was looking forward to the morning. The storm raged through the night and well into the next day, blanketing the ranch in several inches of snow. Serena woke to the unfamiliar sensation of being completely warm and rested, sunlight filtering through the curtains despite the continuing snowfall outside. For a moment, she lay still, relishing the quiet and the softness of the bed. In her father's cabin, mornings began before dawn with the demanding cries of her younger siblings and the endless list of chores that waited for no one. Here, there was a stillness that felt almost decadent. A soft knock at the door roused her from her reverie. "Serena?" Emily called. "Are you awake? I've got breakfast nearly ready." "I'll be right there," Serena replied, hastily rising and reaching for her dress. In the kitchen, Emily was humming as she flipped hotcakes on a cast iron griddle. The delicious aroma of coffee and maple syrup filled the warm room. "Good morning," Emily greeted her cheerfully. "I hope you slept well. Reed's already out checking on the livestock. He says the snow will let up by midday, but we're in for a cold spell. Can I help with anything?" Serena asked, feeling awkward standing idle while Emily worked. "You could set the table if you'd like. Plates are in that cupboard there." Emily gestured with her spatula. "Reed should be back soon, and he always comes in hungry as a bear after morning chores." Serena quickly found the dishes and arranged them on the table, along with the silverware Emily directed her to. It felt strange to be in someone else's kitchen, learning their routines and customs. "So," Emily said casually as she poured batter onto the griddle, "how did you and Reed meet?" "He was awfully tight-lipped about it last night." Serena hesitated, unsure how much Reed had shared with his sister. "He helped me out of a difficult situation," she said carefully. Emily glanced at her with undisguised curiosity. "That sounds like Reed. Always the knight in dusty armor." She smiled. "Was it very dramatic? Did he rescue you from bandits? Or perhaps an unwanted suitor?" Before Serena could respond, the back door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Reed himself, stomping snow from his boots. "Storm's breaking up," he announced, hanging his coat on a peg by the door. "But the north pasture fence took some damage. I'll need to repair it once the snow melts a bit." He nodded at Serena. "Morning, Miss Keller. Hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, noting the formality had returned to his address. In front of Emily, it seemed he was careful to maintain a proper distance. "Reed, Serena was just about to tell me how you two met," Emily said innocently, placing a stack of hotcakes on the table. Reed's eyes met Serena's briefly, something apologetic in them. "It's not much of a story, Em. I encountered Miss Keller and her father while I was in town for supplies. They were having some difficulties, and Miss Keller mentioned she was looking for employment. I remembered you wanted help around the house, so I offered her the position." Emily looked between them, clearly sensing there was more to the tale, but she didn't press the issue. "Well, I'm glad you did. It gets terribly lonely out here sometimes, especially in winter." They ate breakfast together, Emily dominating the conversation with stories about the ranch and the neighboring families. Serena learned that the Lawsons had owned their land for nearly 10 years, building it up from almost nothing after their father had purchased it following his service in the war. "Pa was never the same after Gettysburg," Emily explained, her usual animation dimming slightly. "He couldn't abide crowds or loud noises anymore. That's why we came so far west. He needed the quiet." "Which side did he fight for?" Serena asked. "Union," Reed answered. "Pennsylvania 83rd Infantry. He didn't talk about it much, but he believed in the cause." Serena nodded. The war had ended when she was just a child, but its echoes still resonated throughout the country. After breakfast, Emily insisted on showing Serena around the house, explaining the daily routines and what would be expected of her. The Lawson home was modest but solidly built, with 3 bedrooms, a parlor that doubled as a library, the kitchen with its adjoining dining area, and a small washroom that indeed featured an indoor pump, a luxury Serena had never experienced. Reed added the washroom 2 winters ago, Emily explained proudly. He's quite handy with tools. The barn and the new corral are his work too. As they toured the house, Serena noticed small touches that made it a home: handmade quilts draped over chairs, pressed flowers framed on the walls, shelves of books well worn from reading. It was clear that despite the hardships of ranch life, the Lawsons had created a place of comfort and beauty. "What were you used to before?" Emily asked as they folded linens in the small storage room. "Reed mentioned your father, but not your mother or the rest of your family." Serena smoothed a wrinkle from a pillowcase, choosing her words carefully. "My mother passed away 2 years ago. I have 4 younger siblings who still live with my father. We had a small farm, but the drought made it difficult to sustain." Emily's face softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry about your mother. We lost ours just last year, influenza. It's been difficult." She shook off the melancholy with visible effort. "But now you're here, and I finally have someone to talk to besides Reed and the chickens." Serena couldn't help but smile at Emily's resilient spirit. "The chickens aren't good conversationalists?" "Terrible," Emily confirmed with mock seriousness. "All they do is complain about the feed and gossip about the rooster." By afternoon, the snow had stopped, though the sky remained a steely gray. Reed came in for a quick meal before heading back out to check the cattle and begin repairs on the damaged fence. "Need any help?" Emily offered. Reed shook his head. "Jacob Blackwood's riding over. His pa sent word that he could spare him for the afternoon." He glanced at Serena. "You two stay warm. No sense in everyone getting frostbite." After he left, Emily taught Serena how to make bread the way she liked it, with a hint of honey in the dough. As they worked side by side in the kitchen, kneading dough and preparing vegetables for supper, Serena found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. There was work to be done, certainly, but it was shared work, accompanied by conversation and even laughter. "Reed said you'll be paid fair wages," Emily mentioned as they left the bread to rise. $5 a month, plus room and board. Is that agreeable?" Serena nearly dropped the bowl she was carrying. $5 a month was more than she had ever earned or expected to earn. "That's very generous," she managed to say. Emily looked pleased. "Good. We're not wealthy, but we believe in fair compensation. And of course, you'll have Sundays to yourself, and one additional day each month if you wish to go into town or visit friends." The thought of having time to herself, time that wasn't stolen between chores or claimed by the needs of others, was almost as overwhelming as the wages. "Thank you," Serena said softly. "You and your brother have been incredibly kind." Emily squeezed her arm affectionately. "It's nothing more than what's right. And selfishly, I'm just thrilled to have another woman around. The nearest neighbor with a daughter my age is 10 miles away, and in winter, that might as well be 100. By the time Reed returned with Jacob Blackwood, the kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of baking bread and simmering stew. Jacob proved to be a lanky young man of about 20 with an easy smile and a shock of red hair beneath his worn hat. "Miss Keller," he greeted her politely when introduced. "A pleasure to meet you. My ma says to invite you all for Sunday dinner once the weather clears proper." "That's very kind," Serena replied, noticing the way Jacob's eyes lingered appreciatively on Emily when he thought no one was looking. Reed noticed too, if the slight narrowing of his eyes was any indication. Big brother protectiveness, Serena surmised, hiding a smile. They ate together, Jacob regaling them with news from his family's ranch and the latest gossip from town. Serena was content to listen, observing the dynamics between the others. Emily clearly enjoyed Jacob's attention, laughing at his jokes and asking questions that kept him talking. Reed was quieter but not withdrawn, occasionally offering a dry comment that showed he was following the conversation. After supper, Jacob took his leave, promising to return the next day to help finish the fence repairs. Emily saw him out, lingering on the porch longer than strictly necessary given the cold. Left alone with Reed in the kitchen as they cleared the table, Serena finally asked the question that had been on her mind all day. "You didn't tell Emily how we really met." Reed paused in his task, then continued stacking plates. "No," he admitted. "I thought you might prefer it that way." "I do," she said quickly.
I'm grateful.
"I just wondered why." Reed considered this as he carried the dishes to the wash basin. "Your past is your own, Miss Keller. How much you share and with whom should be your choice, not mine." The simple respect in this statement left Serena momentarily speechless. All her life, decisions had been made for her by her father, by circumstances, by necessity. The idea that this man believed she should control her own narrative was unexpectedly moving. "Thank you," she said simply. Reed nodded once, then turned to add wood to the stove. "Emily likes you," he observed. "She's been wanting company for a long while." "She's very kind," Serena replied. "You both are." A hint of color touched Reed's cheeks at this, visible even in the dim kitchen light. "It's nothing more than decent treatment," he said gruffly. "Something everyone deserves." When Emily returned, pink-cheeked from the cold, and something else, the moment passed. The three of them spent the evening by the fire, Emily showing Serena the quilt she was working on while Reed read aloud from a book of poetry Tennyson, his voice giving depth and resonance to the familiar words. Later, as Serena prepared for bed in her small room, she found herself thinking about Reed Lawson. There was a quietness to him that she initially mistook for coldness, but she was beginning to see was actually thoughtfulness. He considered his words before speaking, weighed actions against consequences, and seemed to value fairness above all. It was a stark contrast to her father, whose moods shifted like wind and whose promises were as substantial as morning mist. Reed Lawson, she was learning, was a man whose word could be trusted. As she drifted toward sleep, Serena realized that for the first time since her mother died, she felt safe. Not just physically sheltered, but emotionally secure in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. It was a dangerous feeling, this sense of safety. Dangerous because it might not last, and dangerous because it made her want things she had long since convinced herself she could live without. The days following the snowstorm settled into a rhythm that Serena found both comforting and strange. Strange because she had never known such ordered calm, comforting because the predictability of life at the Lawson Ranch allowed her to gradually lower her guard. Each morning, Reed rose before dawn to tend to the livestock, returning for breakfast as the sun crested the eastern hills. Emily and Serena prepared the morning meal together, then tackled the household chores, laundry on Mondays, baking on Tuesdays, mending on Wednesdays, and so forth. The work was hard, as all ranch work was, but it was shared fairly. Reed never expected the women to manage everything indoors while he worked outside. He chopped wood for the stoves, helped with the heavier cleaning, and took his turn at the dishes without complaint. In the evenings, the three would gather in the parlor, reading or talking or simply enjoying the quiet together. By the end of her first week, Serena had learned much about the Lawsons. Emily loved music and kept a small melodeon in the parlor, though she admitted she played poorly. Reed was an avid reader with a particular fondness for history and poetry. Both siblings were educated. Their mother had been a schoolteacher before her marriage, and they valued learning in a way Serena's own family never had. On Sunday morning, Serena woke to the sound of Emily's voice outside her door. "Serena? Are you awake? The Blackwoods are expecting us for dinner after services, and it's a fair ride to town." Church services. Serena had nearly forgotten. In the chaos of her father's household, attendance had become sporadic at best, though her mother had always insisted on saying prayers before bed. "I'll be ready shortly," she called back, suddenly anxious. Her two dresses, the blue and the brown, were clean but worn, the hems frayed, and the seams mended multiple times. What would the townspeople think of her appearing in such attire? She dressed in the blue dress, which was marginally better, and pinned her hair as neatly as she could. When she emerged, Emily was waiting in the hallway, resplendent in a forest green dress with a matching bonnet. "Oh," Emily said, noticing Serena's apprehension. "Is something wrong?" "I'm afraid my dress isn't quite suitable for church," Serena admitted, embarrassed. Emily's expression softened with understanding. "Wait here," she said, disappearing into her bedroom. She returned moments later with a rust-colored shawl, beautifully crocheted with a scalloped edge. "This will brighten your ensemble perfectly. It was our mother's, but I think she'd be pleased for you to use it." Serena hesitated. "I couldn't possibly." "Nonsense," Emily insisted, draping the shawl around Serena's shoulders. "It suits you. And no one in Cottonwood Falls cares overmuch about fashion. Anyway, half the congregation will be in their work clothes." Reed was waiting by the wagon, dressed in what Serena recognized as his best shirt, a crisp white cotton beneath a dark wool coat. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair neatly, though a few unruly strands already curled at his temples. "Ladies," he greeted them, offering a hand to help each of them onto the wagon seat. His eyes lingered momentarily on Serena, noting the shawl. "That was our mother's," he observed quietly. "Emily loaned it to me," Serena explained quickly. "I hope that's all right." A small smile tugged at the corner of Reed's mouth. "It looks well on you," he said simply, then turned his attention to the horses. The ride to town took nearly an hour, the wagon following a well-traveled road that wound through snow-covered hills. Cottonwood Falls proved to be a modest settlement, a single main street with a general store, a small hotel, a livery stable, and a few other businesses. The white-clapboard church stood at the far end, its bell tower visible from a distance. As they approached, Serena noticed other wagons and riders converging on the church. Families in their Sunday best, ranchers in clean but well-worn clothes, a few finely dressed merchants, and their wives all nodded greetings to the Lawsons as they arrived. "Word travels fast in small towns," Emily murmured to Serena as Reed helped them down from the wagon. "Everyone knows you're staying with us, so be prepared for curiosity." Indeed, Serena felt the weight of interested gazes as they entered the church. Reed guided them to a pew about halfway down the aisle, positioning himself on the outside as if to shield the women from undue attention. The service was simple but heartfelt, led by a gray-haired preacher with a resonant voice and kind eyes. Serena found herself moved by the familiar hymns and the sense of community that filled the small church. When they sang "Amazing Grace," Reed's deep baritone beside her sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. After the service, there was no escaping the interest of the congregation. Women approached with warm welcomes and thinly veiled curiosity, while men nodded respectfully and asked Reed about ranch matters. "So you're the young lady staying with the Lawsons," said a plump woman with rosy cheeks and sharp eyes. "I'm Martha Blackwood, Jacob's mother. We're so pleased you could join us for dinner today." "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Blackwood," Serena replied politely. "It's very kind of you." "Nonsense, dear. We're practically neighbors, and neighbors look after each other out here." Martha lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And between us, it's nice to see Reed bringing a young woman around. That boy works too hard and socializes too little, if you ask me." Before Serena could correct the misunderstanding, Emily appeared at her side, linking their arms. "Mrs. Blackwood, I see you've met Serena. Isn't she lovely? She's been such a help already. You should taste her apple pie." Martha beamed. "Wonderful. A woman who can cook is worth her weight in gold out here. Well, we'd best be heading back to prepare dinner. See you both shortly." As Martha bustled away, Serena turned to Emily. "She thinks Reed and I—" "Oh, everyone will assume that," Emily said with a dismissive wave. "It's how things work out here. A single man brings a single woman to his ranch, and the gossips start planning the wedding. Don't worry about it. But Serena did worry as they made their way to the Blackwood Ranch, a larger and more established property than the Lawsons. The main house was an impressive two-story structure with a wide porch and multiple chimneys. Several outbuildings and a large barn completed the picture of prosperity. The Blackwoods came west before the war, Reed explained as they approached. Samuel Blackwood was one of the first settlers in this valley. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with the aroma of roasting meat and baking bread. Samuel Blackwood, a broad-shouldered man with Jacob's red hair now streaked with silver, greeted them heartily. "Reed, good to see you, son." And Emily, pretty as ever. His kind eyes turned to Serena. "And you must be Miss Keller. Welcome to our home." Dinner was served in a spacious dining room, the table laden with more food than Serena had seen in one place since before the drought. Besides the Blackwood parents and Jacob, there were two younger sisters, Lily, 16, and Rose, 12, who regarded Serena with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Keller, I understand you're from the eastern part of the territory," Mrs. Blackwood said as she passed a platter of roast beef. "What brought you out this way?" Serena felt Reed tense slightly beside her. "Family circumstances," she replied carefully. "I was fortunate that Mr. Lawson was looking for household help when our paths crossed." "Most fortunate indeed," Samuel Blackwood agreed, with a knowing glance at his wife. "Good help is hard to find in these parts, and good company even harder." The conversation flowed easily after that, touching on local matters, the recent snowstorm, and plans for the coming spring. Serena observed the easy camaraderie between the Blackwoods and the Lawsons, the result of years of neighboring and mutual support. Jacob, she noticed, paid particular attention to Emily, finding reasons to pass her dishes or ask her opinion. Emily responded with demure smiles and the occasional touch to his arm when making a point, subtle flirtations that seemed to escape Reed's notice as he discussed cattle prices with Samuel. After dinner, the men retired to the study for cigars, while the women gathered in the parlor. Lily and Rose immediately claimed seats on either side of Serena. "Is it true you're living at the Lawson Ranch now?" Lily asked eagerly. "Yes, I'm helping with a household," Serena confirmed. "What's it like?" Rose wanted to know. "Is Reed as serious at home as he is everywhere else?" "Rose," her mother admonished. "That's impertinent." Serena smiled. "Mr. Lawson is thoughtful and kind," she said honestly. "And he reads poetry beautifully." This revelation clearly surprised the Blackwood women. "Poetry," Martha repeated. "Well, I never would have guessed. Tennyson is his favorite," Emily added, clearly enjoying their reaction. "He used to read to our mother in the evenings. I think it reminds him of her." The conversation turned to the upcoming Christmas celebrations, still a few weeks away. The Blackwoods traditionally hosted a gathering for the neighboring ranches, and Martha insisted that Serena must attend. "It's the social event of the season," Lily explained excitedly. "Everyone comes, and there's dancing and singing, and the most wonderful food." "That sounds lovely," Serena said, though the thought of a large social gathering made her somewhat anxious. Her experience with such events was limited to the occasional church picnic, and those had become rare in recent years as her father's behavior grew more erratic. When it was time to leave, the sun was already low in the sky. Reed helped Serena and Emily into the wagon, then took his place between them for the journey home. "The Blackwoods were very kind," Serena observed as they traveled through the gathering dusk. "Salt of the earth," Reed agreed. "Samuel gave me my first job when we came west. Taught me everything I know about ranching. And Mrs. Blackwood thinks you should get married," Emily added mischievously. "She told me so directly when you went for your cigars." Reed's ears reddened visibly even in the fading light. "Martha Blackwood would have every bachelor in the territory married off if she had her way," he muttered. "She's not wrong," Emily persisted. This ranch needs children running around. Little feet and laughter would make it a proper home. The ranch is fine as it is, Reed said firmly, though Serena thought she detected a note of wistfulness beneath his gruff response. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves on the packed snow. The Christmas gathering sounds wonderful, Serena ventured after a time. Have you attended before? Every year since we arrived, Emily confirmed. It's truly the highlight of winter. Reed even dances, though he'll deny it if you ask him directly. I dance when necessary, Reed corrected, a smile evident in his voice despite the darkness. Usually when Martha Blackwood corners me and gives me no choice in the matter. Serena tried to imagine Reed dancing, his tall frame moving with the music, his serious expression perhaps softening with enjoyment, and found the image surprisingly pleasing. Do you dance, Miss Keller? Reed asked, and Serena realized he had turned slightly toward her. Poorly, she admitted. My mother taught me the basics when I was young, but there weren't many opportunities to practice. Well, you'll have plenty of opportunity at the Blackwoods, Emily assured her. Every unmarried man in 3 counties will be asking for a turn. Serena doubted this very much but appreciated Emily's kindness in suggesting it. I may need some refresher lessons before then, she said lightly. Reed can teach you, Emily suggested immediately. He's quite good, actually. Our mother insisted we learn properly. I'm sure Miss Keller has better uses for her time than dancing lessons, Reed said, though without conviction. Nonsense, Emily declared. It's decided. Reed will teach you the basics in the evenings. We can move the furniture in the parlor to make space. Serena expected Reed to object further, but he merely sighed in a way that suggested long experience with his sister's determined nature. If Miss Keller wishes, he conceded. I would be grateful, Serena said softly, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting on the narrow wagon seat, his solid warmth beside her a shield against the cold night air. When they reached the ranch, the house was dark and cold. Reed immediately set about lighting lamps and stoking fires while Emily and Serena hung their coats and bonnets. Would you like some tea before bed? Emily offered. I'm too awake to sleep just yet. They gathered in the kitchen, warming their hands on steaming mugs as Reed recounted a conversation he'd had with Samuel about a new breeding bull the older man was considering purchasing. Jacob seemed particularly attentive today, Reed observed casually, though his eyes were sharp as they focused on his sister. Emily's cheeks colored slightly. Jacob is always attentive, she said dismissively. It's just his way. Reed replied, clearly unconvinced. Samuel mentioned he's thinking of giving Jacob the north section of their property next year, setting him up with his own place. This information clearly interested Emily, though she tried to appear nonchalant. Did he? Well, that makes sense. Jacob has worked hard for his father. Reed's mouth twitched with what might have been amusement. Indeed he has. He glanced at Serena, a knowing look passing between them that made her hide a smile behind her mug. Later, as Serena prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the day. The church service, the dinner with the Blackwoods, the easy conversation on the ride home all had a sense of normalcy she had almost forgotten could exist. And beneath it all, a growing awareness of Reed Lawson not just as her employer or benefactor, but as a man with depths she was only beginning to understand. The thought of dancing lessons with him brought a flutter of anticipation that Serena firmly attributed to the novelty of the situation rather than anything more significant. After all, she reminded herself as she blew out her lamp, she had known Reed for barely a week. And more importantly, she had come here for work and the freedom it represented, not to develop feelings for the first kind man she'd encountered. Still, as sleep claimed her, her dreams were filled with music and movement, and the steady presence of a tall figure with storm-gray eyes. The promised dancing lessons began the following evening after supper. Emily pushed the furniture to the edges of the parlor, creating a space in the center of the room, then seated herself at the melodeon. "I can't promise to play well," she warned, "but I can manage a simple waltz." Reed stood awkwardly in the center of the cleared space, looking decidedly uncomfortable with the situation. He had changed from his work clothes into a clean shirt, and his hair was still damp from washing. "Miss Keller," he said formally, extending his hand. "Shall we begin?" Serena stepped forward, suddenly nervous. "I should warn you again that I'm not very practiced at this." A smile tugged at the corner of Reed's mouth. "Neither am I, despite what my sister claims. We'll muddle through together." He showed her the proper position, his right hand at her waist, her left hand on his shoulder, their other hands clasped together at shoulder height. Even this formal stance brought them closer than they had ever stood before, and Serena was acutely aware of his height and the breadth of his shoulders beneath her fingers. "The waltz is simple," Reed explained, his voice steady despite their proximity. "3 beats. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I'll step forward with my left foot. You step back with your right." Emily began to play, the melody slightly halting but recognizable. Reed counted quietly, guiding Serena through the basic box step. She stumbled at first, her eyes fixed on their feet, but gradually found the rhythm. "Look up," Reed instructed gently. "If you watch your feet, you'll trip. Trust the movement." Serena raised her gaze to find him watching her with a hint of amusement in his eyes. The change in focus immediately improved her steps, though she was now distracted by the unexpected warmth in his expression. "Better," he approved. "Now we'll try turning." The addition of a turn nearly undid her progress, and she stepped on his foot, apologizing profusely. "No harm done," Reed assured her. "My boots have weathered worse." Emily played on, occasionally hitting a wrong note, but maintaining the rhythm. As they continued to practice, Serena gradually relaxed, finding a natural flow to the movement. Reed was a patient teacher, his hand at her waist guiding rather than controlling, his steps adjusting to match her growing confidence. "You're a quick study," he observed after they had completed several turns without mishap. "You're a good teacher," she replied, surprised by how much she was enjoying herself. The lesson continued for nearly an hour, until Emily declared her fingers were cramping from playing. By then, Serena had mastered the basic waltz and was beginning to learn a simple 2-step. "You'll be the belle of the Blackwood Christmas gathering," Emily predicted as they moved the furniture back into place. "Every bachelor from here to Helena will be asking for a dance." "I think you exaggerate," Serena laughed, though she was pleased with her progress. Reed, who had been strangely quiet since the end of their practice, excused himself to check on the livestock before retiring. "Did I say something wrong?" Serena asked Emily after he had gone. Emily shook her head, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "Not at all. My brother just isn't used to holding a pretty woman in his arms. I expect he needs some air to cool his thoughts." Serena felt heat rise to her cheeks at this frank assessment. "Surely not. Mr. Lawson has been nothing but proper and respectful." "Reed is always proper and respectful," Emily agreed. "That doesn't mean he's made of stone." She patted Serena's arm sympathetically. "Don't worry about it. Reed would sooner cut off his hand than act improperly toward any woman, especially one under his protection." This observation, meant to be reassuring, instead left Serena with a strange feeling of disappointment that she quickly pushed aside. Of course, Reed saw her primarily as someone under his protection. That was, after all, exactly what she was, a young woman he had rescued from an impossible situation and given employment out of kindness. The dancing lessons continued over the next several evenings, with Emily occasionally joining in to demonstrate particular steps or to give Reed a break. Serena proved to be an apt pupil, quickly mastering the basic dances common at rural gatherings. Reed, for his part, maintained a careful formality during their lessons, though Serena occasionally caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret when he thought she wasn't looking. The moment their practice ended each evening, he would step away, as if needing to establish physical distance between them. As the days passed, Serena found herself settling into life at the Lawson Ranch with surprising ease. The routine of chores, meals, and evening relaxation provided a stability she had never known in her father's chaotic household. Emily became more friend than employer, sharing confidences and laughter as they worked together. Reed remained somewhat more reserved, but gradually, Serena began to see beneath his quiet exterior. She noticed the care he took with everything he did, whether mending a fence, feeding a newborn calf, or turning the pages of a beloved book. His hands, strong and calloused from ranch work, could be surprisingly gentle. She observed his patience with Emily's occasional dramatic moods, his kindness to the animals in his care, and his unfailing courtesy to everyone he encountered. In the evenings, when he read aloud or simply sat with them by the fire, she found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw beneath his neatly trimmed beard, the slight furrow between his brows when he concentrated. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Serena was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard the sound of an axe striking wood. Following the noise, she found Reed at the woodpile, splitting logs for the kitchen stove. The day was unseasonably warm for December, and he had removed his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He worked with a steady rhythm, each stroke precise and powerful. Serena paused, momentarily transfixed by the sight. Reed sensed her presence and looked up, pausing mid-swing. "Miss Keller," he acknowledged, using his arm to wipe sweat from his brow. "Did you need something?" "No," she said quickly, embarrassed to be caught staring. "I was just hanging the laundry, and heard you working." Reed nodded, setting another log on the chopping block. "Weather's turning tomorrow. Thought I'd get ahead on the wood." Serena hesitated, then asked something that had been on her mind. "Mr. Lawson, may I ask you a personal question?" He looked up, surprised. "You may ask. I can't promise to answer." "Why do you still call me Miss Keller?" "Emily calls me Serena, but you never do, even though we've lived under the same roof for weeks now." Reed set down the axe carefully, considering her question. "I suppose I thought it more proper, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" "You work for us," he said simply, "and you're a young woman alone. I wouldn't want to presume a familiarity that might make you uncomfortable." Serena found this consideration touching, if unnecessary. "I wouldn't be uncomfortable," she assured him. "In fact, Miss Keller, feels rather formal for someone who steps on your toes every evening during dancing lessons." A rare full smile transformed Reed's serious face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Fair point," he conceded. "Would you prefer I call you Serena?" "I would," she confirmed, surprised by how much it mattered to her. "Very well, Serena," he said, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "And you should feel free to call me Reed, if you like." "Thank you, Reed," she replied, testing the informality. It felt right, somehow, as if a small barrier had been removed between them. He picked up the axe again, but before resuming his work, he said, "For what it's worth, I've never thought of you primarily as someone who works for us. You've become—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Important to this household. To both Emily and myself." The simple statement warmed Serena more than she could explain. "Thank you," she said again, not trusting herself to say more. Reed nodded once, then returned to his task. Serena made her way back to the laundry, aware that something had shifted between them, something small but significant. That evening, as they sat in the parlor after supper, Emily announced that she needed to go into town the following day for supplies. "The Blackwood Christmas gathering is just over a week away," she reminded them, "and I've nothing suitable to wear. Serena, you should come with me. We could find fabric for a new dress for you as well." Serena shook her head. "That's very kind, but I can't afford. Consider it your Christmas gift. Emily interrupted. Or an advance on your wages, if your pride won't allow a gift. Emily, Reed said warningly from his chair by the fire. Don't push. I'm not pushing, Emily protested. I'm being practical. Serena needs a proper dress for the gathering, and I need her opinion on the fabric I choose. She turned pleading eyes to Serena. Please say you'll come. The trip will be so much more enjoyable with company. Serena glanced at Reed, who shrugged slightly as if to say, It's your decision. All right, she agreed finally, but only if you'll let me repay you for my wages. Emily clapped her hands delightedly. Wonderful. We'll leave right after breakfast. Reed, you'll have to fend for yourself for lunch. I expect I'll survive, Reed said dryly, though his eyes held amusement as they met Serena's. I managed to feed myself for years before either of you arrived. Yes, and what gourmet meals they were, Emily teased. Beans and bacon for weeks on end. The following morning dawned clear and cold, with a sharp wind that hinted at more snow to come. Emily and Serena bundled up warmly for the ride to town, with Reed insisting they take extra blankets. Be back before dark, he instructed as he helped them into the wagon. Storms brewing to the north. Yes, brother, Emily said with exaggerated patience. We'll be sensible, I promise. The trip to Cottonwood Falls took on a festive air, with Emily chattering excitedly about the upcoming Christmas gathering and the dress she envisioned. Serena found her enthusiasm contagious, allowing herself to look forward to the event despite her lingering nerves about socializing with strangers. The general store in Cottonwood Falls was owned by a Mr. Abernathy, a thin man with spectacles and a formal manner that softened considerably at the sight of Emily Lawson. Miss Emily, a pleasure as always, he greeted her. And, Miss Keller, welcome. News travels fast in small towns. I've heard you're staying with the Lawsons. Thank you, Mr. Abernathy, Serena replied politely. Yes, I'm helping with the household. And we're here for fabric, Emily announced. Something for the Blackwood Christmas gathering. Your finest selection, please. Mr. Abernathy proudly displayed his latest shipment of fabrics, wools, and cotton in various colors and patterns. Emily immediately gravitated toward a deep blue wool that she declared would bring out Serena's eyes perfectly. For herself, Emily selected a rich green that complemented her golden brown hair. Mr. Abernathy added matching thread, buttons, and notions to their purchases, along with the other supplies on Emily's list. We'll need to find Mrs. Turner, Emily said as they left the store. She's the best seamstress in town, and with the gathering so close, we'll need her help to have these ready in time. Mrs. Turner proved to be a brisk, efficient woman with a talent for visualizing finished garments from mere descriptions. She took their measurements, listened to Emily's ideas, and promised to have both dresses ready within a week. The blue will suit you, she told Serena as she measured her waist. With your coloring, you'll outshine half the girls there, especially if we cut it to show off that figure properly. Serena blushed at the frank assessment and used to such comments about her appearance. Her mother had always emphasized modesty and practicality over beauty. After leaving Mrs. Turner's, Emily insisted they stop at the small cafe for lunch. Reed gave us money for a treat, she explained, and their apple pie is nearly as good as yours. The cafe was warm and inviting, with checkered cloths on the tables and delicious aromas wafting from the kitchen. As they enjoyed their meal, Serena became aware of curious glances from other patrons. Everyone's looking at us, she murmured to Emily. At you, Emily corrected with a smile. You're new and pretty, and you're living with the Lawsons. That makes you the most interesting person in Cottonwood Falls at the moment. Surely not, Serena protested. You underestimate the power of gossip in a small town, Emily replied. Besides, Reed hasn't brought a woman home since, well, ever, that I can recall. People are naturally curious. But we're not, Serena stammered. Emily patted her hand reassuringly. I know that, and you know that, and Reed knows that. but people will talk regardless. It's the way of things. As if to prove her point, an elegantly dressed woman approached their table, her sharp eyes assessing Serena with undisguised interest. "Emily, dear," she greeted. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Emily's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Preston, this is Serena Keller." "Serena, Victoria Preston is our banker's wife." "How do you do?" Serena said politely. "Charmed," Mrs. Preston replied, her gaze still evaluating. "I understand you're staying at the Lawson Ranch."
How?
"Interesting." "Serena is helping with the household," Emily explained, her tone making it clear she found the conversation tiresome. "Since Mother passed, we've needed another pair of hands." "Of course," Mrs. Preston said, clearly not believing this explanation for a moment. "Well, Miss Keller, I do hope you'll attend the Blackwood Christmas gathering. It's quite the event of the season. We're having dresses made especially," Emily informed her with a hint of defiance. Mrs. Preston's eyebrows rose slightly. "How lovely. I look forward to seeing them." With a nod that managed to be both polite and dismissive, she returned to her own table. "Don't mind Victoria Preston," Emily said once the woman was out of earshot. "She thinks her husband's position makes her the arbiter of local society. And she's had her eye on Reed for her niece Harriet for years." "Oh," Serena said, unsure how to respond to this information. "Is her niece? Is Reed interested?" Emily laughed. "Harriet Preston is a perfectly nice girl, but about as interesting as a fence post. Reed has always found excuses to be busy elsewhere when Victoria tries to arrange meetings." This shouldn't have relieved Serena as much as it did. She reminded herself firmly that Reed's romantic interests or lack thereof were none of her concern. They finished their meal and completed the rest of their errands, mindful of Reed's warning about returning before dark. The wind had picked up by the time they headed home, bringing with it the first flakes of the predicted storm. "Reed was right about the weather," Emily observed, pulling her coat tighter around her. "We should hurry." They made good time on the road back to the ranch, arriving just as the snowfall began to intensify. Reed was waiting on the porch, his expression relaxing visibly when he saw them approach. "Just in time," he called, coming to help them down from the wagon. "Another hour, and you'd have been caught in it proper." "We're perfectly fine," Emily assured him, though she looked pleased by his concern. "And wait until you see the fabrics we chose. Mrs. Turner is making our dresses, and they'll be ready just in time for the gathering." Reed took the reins from Emily and led the horse toward the barn. "I'll tend to Jupiter. You two get inside where it's warm." Later, after supper, Emily spread their purchases on the kitchen table for Reed's inspection. He examined the fabrics with appropriate interest, though Serena suspected his enthusiasm was more for his sister's benefit than from any genuine excitement about dress materials. "The blue will suit you," he said to Serena, echoing Mrs. Turner's assessment. His eyes met hers briefly, then returned to the fabric. "It matches your eyes." The simple observation, delivered in his straightforward manner, pleased Serena more than all of Mrs. Turner's professional compliments. She looked down, smoothing the fabric with her fingers to hide her reaction. "That's exactly what I said," Emily exclaimed triumphantly. "Reed may not care about fashion, but he has a good eye for color." "Our mother's influence," Reed explained, folding the fabric carefully and handing it back to Serena. "She insisted we learn to appreciate beauty in all its forms." Outside, the storm gathered strength, wind howling around the corners of the house and snow accumulating rapidly. Reed added wood to the stove and checked that all the windows were securely latched. "No dancing lesson tonight," he said, glancing out at the worsening weather. "I need to check on the livestock one more time before this gets any worse." "Be careful," Serena said without thinking, concern evident in her voice. Reed paused at the door, surprised by her worry. "Always am," he assured her, his expression softening briefly before he disappeared into the swirling snow. Emily watched this exchange with interest, but made no comment until Reed was gone. "He'll be fine," she told Serena. "Reed knows this land better than anyone, storm or no storm." "Of course," Serena agreed, embarrassed by her obvious concern. "I just know how dangerous sudden storms can be." Emily's expression grew more serious. "Is that how you lost your mother? In a storm?" Serena shook her head. "No, it was fever. But my father's brother, my Uncle James, was caught in a blizzard 2 counties over. They didn't find him until spring thaw." Emily squeezed her hand, sympathetically.
I'm sorry.
"But truly, Reed will be fine. He never takes unnecessary risks." When Reed returned half an hour later, covered in snow but otherwise unharmed, Serena felt a disproportionate sense of relief. He shook off the snow at the door, hanging his coat and removing his boots before joining them by the fire. "Animals are secure," he reported, accepting the cup of coffee Emily pressed into his hands. "But we're in for a rough night. Winds picking up and the temperatures dropping fast." They sat together in the warm parlor as the storm raged outside, Reed reading aloud from a collection of Washington Irving stories while Emily worked on her quilt and Serena mended one of Reed's shirts. The domesticity of the scene struck Serena suddenly how natural it felt to be here with them, how quickly she had come to think of this place as home. The realization was both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because she had found safety and purpose here. Unsettling because she was beginning to want more than she had any right to expect, not just shelter and employment, but belonging. Family. And perhaps something else, something she hardly dared acknowledge, even to herself, when she caught Reed watching her with that unreadable expression in his storm-gray eyes. When she finally retired to her room that night, the wind still howling outside her window, Serena reminded herself firmly of the reality of her situation. She was fortunate, incredibly fortunate to have found a place with the Lawsons. To want more, to hope for more, was both greedy and foolish. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, her mind filled with images of blue fabric and the quiet approval in Reed's eyes when he'd said it matched her own. The week before the Blackwood Christmas gathering passed in a flurry of activity. The storm left behind nearly a foot of fresh snow, creating extra work around the ranch. Fences needed clearing, animals required additional care in the cold, and the path to the main road had to be shoveled repeatedly. Despite the added chores, there was a festive atmosphere in the Lawson household. Emily decorated the parlor with pine boughs and red ribbons, filling the house with the fresh scent of evergreen. In the evenings, they strung cranberries and popcorn for garlands while Reed read Christmas stories aloud. 3 days before the gathering, Emily announced they needed to go into town to collect their dresses from Mrs. Turner. Reed, concerned about the condition of the roads after the storm, insisted on driving them himself. "I need supplies anyway," he said when Emily protested that they could manage. "And the drifts are deep in some places. Better to have someone who knows where the road actually lies beneath all that snow." Cottonwood Falls looked like a scene from a Christmas card, with snow piled high along the boardwalks and evergreen wreaths adorning the shop doors. Mrs. Turner was waiting with their dresses, which she insisted they try on one final time to ensure the fit was perfect. Serena had never owned anything so fine as the dress Emily had commissioned for her. The deep blue wool was styled simply but elegantly, with a fitted bodice that emphasized her narrow waist and a full skirt that swished pleasingly when she moved. Small pearl buttons decorated the cuffs and collar, adding a touch of refinement without ostentation. "Oh," Emily breathed when Serena emerged from behind the dressing screen. Reed was right about the color. "You look absolutely beautiful." Serena turned to the small mirror in Mrs. Turner's fitting room, barely recognizing the young woman reflected there. The blue did indeed bring out the color of her eyes, making them appear larger and more luminous in her face. The cut of the dress flattered her figure in a way her old, shapeless garments never had. "Mrs. Turner, you're a marvel," Emily declared, admiring her own dress of rich green wool with satin trim. "We'll be the belles of the gathering." Mrs. Turner beamed at the praise, making a few final adjustments to Serena's hem. "Your young man will be quite struck," she told Serena with a wink. "I don't have a young man," Serena corrected quickly. Mrs. Turner smiled knowingly. "Not yet, perhaps." They carefully packed the dresses in paper and rejoined Reed, who was waiting patiently in the general store, examining a display of new tools. His eyes lingered briefly on the packages they carried, but he made no comment beyond asking if they had everything they needed. On the ride home, Emily chattered excitedly about the gathering, describing the decorations, music, and traditions Serena could expect. Reed occasionally added a comment or correction, but mostly he focused on guiding the horses through the snow-covered road. "The Blackwoods always have a magnificent tree," Emily explained. "Samuel and the boys cut the biggest pine they can find and bring it into the main parlor. Martha decorates it with candles and glass ornaments she brought from back east. And everyone brings food," Reed added. "It's a proper feast." "What should we contribute?" Serena asked, realizing she hadn't considered this aspect of the event. "Your apple pie," Emily said immediately. "It's better than Martha's, though don't tell her I said so." The day before the gathering, the household was busy with preparations. Serena baked 2 apple pies and a batch of gingerbread cookies, filling the kitchen with delicious aromas. Emily wrapped small gifts. She had made embroidered handkerchiefs for the Blackwood women and carved wooden ornaments Reed had crafted for the men. "I have something for you as well," Emily told Serena as they worked. "But you'll have to wait until Christmas morning to receive it." "You shouldn't have," Serena protested. "You've already given me so much with the dress." "Nonsense," Emily interrupted. "You're family now." The simple statement caught Serena off guard. Family. Was that how the Lawsons saw her? The thought warmed her deeply, though she couldn't quite believe it could be true after such a short time. That evening, Reed surprised them both by producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For the gathering tomorrow," he explained, handing it to Serena. "Emily mentioned you might need it." Curious, Serena unwrapped the package to find a pair of delicate gloves in soft cream-colored leather. They were clearly new and of fine quality, the kind of luxury she had never owned. "They're beautiful," she said, touching them reverently. "But I can't accept something so expensive." "You can and you will," Reed said firmly. "Every lady needs proper gloves for dancing, and yours were." "Practically in tatters," Emily finished for him when he hesitated. "Reed noticed when you were practicing your dancing." Serena looked up at Reed, who appeared somewhat embarrassed by his sister's forthrightness. "Thank you," she said simply. "They're perfect." He nodded once, accepting her gratitude without further comment, though she thought she detected a pleased expression briefly cross his face. The morning of the gathering dawned clear and cold, with sunlight sparkling on the fresh snow. After completing the essential chores, they all set about preparing for the evening. Emily insisted on helping Serena dress, arranging her honey-brown hair in an elegant style with soft curls framing her face. "There," Emily said, stepping back to admire her work. "You look absolutely lovely." "Reed won't know what hit him." "Emily," Serena protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "Your brother is my employer. That's all." Emily raised a skeptical eyebrow. "If you say so." "But I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." "And how is that?" Serena couldn't help asking, then immediately regretted the question when she saw Emily's triumphant expression. "Like a man seeing the sunrise after a very long night," Emily replied softly. "Like you're something precious he never expected to find." Serena shook her head, refusing to let herself dwell on this poetic description. "You have an overactive imagination," she said firmly. "Now let me help you with your hair before we're late." When they finally emerged from Emily's bedroom, Reed was waiting in the parlor, dressed in his best clothes, a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a crisp white shirt, and a string tie. He had trimmed his beard and combed his hair neatly, though a few rebellious strands still curled at his temples. He turned at their entrance, his eyes widening slightly as they fell on Serena. For a moment, he simply stared, and Serena felt herself flush under his intense gaze. "You both look very nice," he said finally, his voice slightly rougher than usual. His eyes remained on Serena for a heartbeat longer before he cleared his throat and added, "We should get going if we don't want to be late." The ride to the Blackwood Ranch was mostly silent, with Emily occasionally pointing out particularly beautiful views of snow-covered landscape in the late afternoon light. Reed seemed unusually taciturn, focusing on guiding the horses rather than joining the conversation. As they approached the Blackwood property, they could see other wagons and riders converging on the main house, which glowed with the light of many lamps and candles. Music and laughter spilled out whenever the front door opened to admit new guests. Reed helped both women down from the wagon, his hand lingering briefly on Serena's waist to steady her in the snow. The touch, even through layers of wool and cotton, sent an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. Inside, the Blackwood home had been transformed into a wonderland of greenery, ribbons, and candlelight. A massive pine tree dominated one corner of the main parlor, decorated just as Emily had described, with glass ornaments and small candles that cast a warm glow. At least 30 people had already arrived, with more coming in behind them. Martha Blackwood hurried forward to greet them, resplendent in a burgundy dress that complemented her still vibrant red hair. "Emily, Reed, you're here at last. And Serena, my dear, don't you look absolutely lovely?" She ushered them further into the house, taking their coats and directing them toward tables laden with food and drink. Serena placed her pies among the impressive array of desserts, feeling oddly proud to contribute to the feast. The gathering was unlike anything Serena had experienced before. The main rooms of the Blackwood house were filled with neighbors from miles around, representing every ranch and homestead in the area. Children darted between the adults, playing games in the less crowded corners. A small group of musicians, 2 fiddlers, a guitarist, and an accordion player provided lively music from a cleared space near the main parlor. Emily was immediately surrounded by friends, her vivacious personality drawing people to her like moths to a flame. Reed greeted various neighbors with handshakes and brief conversations, introducing Serena to so many people that she quickly lost track of names. Jacob Blackwood appeared at Emily's side almost immediately, claiming her attention with obvious delight. Serena noticed Reed watching this interaction with a mixture of resignation and protective concern. "Your sister seems quite taken with Jacob," she observed quietly. Reed sighed. "Has been since she was 16. I had hoped she might outgrow it, but—" "You don't approve?" Serena asked, surprised. "Jacob's a good man," Reed admitted.
"Hard-working, honest.
I just—" He hesitated. "She's all the family I have left. I'm not eager to see her go, even if it's only a few miles away." The simple admission of vulnerability touched Serena deeply. "She'll always be your sister," she said gently, "no matter where she lives." Reed looked down at her, his expression softening. "I know, and I want her to be happy. If Jacob makes her happy." He shrugged. "I'll learn to live with it." Their conversation was interrupted by Samuel Blackwood, who approached with a broad smile and 2 glasses of punch. "Reed, glad you could make it. And Miss Keller, you look radiant tonight." He handed them each a glass. "Martha's special recipe, not too strong, but enough to warm you up for dancing." The punch was sweet with a hint of something stronger underneath rum, Serena guessed. She sipped it cautiously, enjoying the warmth that spread through her. As the evening progressed, the music grew livelier and couples began to dance. Jacob led Emily onto the floor for a spirited reel, both of them laughing as they moved through the steps. Serena watched from the sidelines, enjoying the music and the festive atmosphere. Serena. Martha Blackwood appeared at her elbow. You're not dancing. We can't have that. Not when you look so lovely in that blue dress. Before Serena could protest, Martha had beckoned to a young man nearby. Thomas. Come meet Miss Keller. She needs a dancing partner. Thomas Prescott proved to be the son of a neighboring rancher, a pleasant-faced young man with an easy smile. He bowed slightly to Serena. Would you honor me with this dance, Miss Keller? Remembering her lessons with Reed, Serena accepted with more confidence than she felt. Thomas led her onto the floor just as the musicians began a waltz. To her relief, the steps came back to her easily, and she found herself moving gracefully in time with the music. You dance very well, Miss Keller, Thomas complimented her. Have you lived in Cottonwood Falls long? Only a few weeks, she replied. I'm staying with the Lawsons. Ah, Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. Reed Lawson's a good man. One of the best in these parts, though he keeps to himself more than most. He's been very kind to me, Serena agreed. Thomas smiled. Not hard to be kind to a pretty girl like you. The compliment, delivered with cheerful simplicity, made Serena blush. She wasn't used to such direct admiration, especially from a handsome young man. After Thomas, other partners claimed her for dances. Jacob's father Samuel, the elderly Mr. Finch who owned the sawmill, and several other young men from neighboring ranches. Serena found herself enjoying the attention and the dancing far more than she had anticipated. Between dances, she caught glimpses of Reed. He danced occasionally with Martha Blackwood, with Emily, with a few other women of the community, but spent most of his time in conversation with the older men, discussing cattle prices and weather predictions for the winter ahead. Several times, she felt his eyes on her as she danced with other partners, but whenever she looked his way, he seemed absorbed in conversation. After a particularly energetic reel that left her breathless, Serena excused herself to get some air. The main rooms had grown warm with so many people, and she made her way to a small side porch that was momentarily unoccupied. The night air was crisp and cold after the heat inside, and she pulled her shawl closer around her shoulders. The sky above was clear and brilliant with stars, the snow-covered landscape gleaming silver in the moonlight. Too warm inside? Reed's voice came from behind her, startling her slightly. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his tall figure silhouetted against the light from within. Just needed a moment of quiet, she explained. It's beautiful out here. Reed stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The sounds of music and laughter immediately muted, creating a pocket of stillness around them. You seem to be enjoying yourself, he observed, coming to stand beside her at the railing. You've become quite popular with a local gentleman. Was there a hint of something in his tone disapproval, perhaps, or something else? Serena couldn't quite tell. Everyone has been very welcoming, she said carefully. And the dancing lessons were helpful. Thank you for those. Reed nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. You're a natural. Far more graceful than I led you to believe. I had a good teacher, she replied softly. They stood in silence for a moment, the cold air creating small clouds of their breath in the moonlight. Serena was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the faint scent of soap and cedar that she had come to associate with him. Are you happy here, Serena? He asked suddenly, his voice low. At the ranch, I mean, with us. The question caught her off guard. Yes, I am, she replied earnestly, surprised by how true the words felt. You've both been so kind to me, and I feel safe here. A flicker of something crossed Reed's expression, but he quickly masked it. Good. That's important. As they gazed out at the snowy landscape together, Serena felt an unspoken connection forming between them, one that hinted at possibilities beyond mere kindness and comfort. But just as quickly, Reed seemed to pull back, redirecting his focus. Shall we return? I'm certain your admirers are missing you. Serena nodded, though inside, a part of her wished they could linger in this moment a little longer, caught in the quiet magic of the night.